Hey man, how's it going?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's been a while since we've been able to talk in interview form, so it's great to be able to catch up, especially with everything you've been able to accomplish over the last several years.
Yeah, man, it's been a wild ride, I guess, but it's the way it is.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, there's so many great projects and guest appearances and live shows that you've been able to be a part of now. And of course, the album that we're about to be talking about isn't even your only release in any way, shape, or form of 2023, but it's one that has meant so near and dear to me. Over the years, especially the first time we got to talk, you were letting me in about Silent Skies before it was officially announced and everything, and it really meant a lot to me that you let me know about this. And over the course of these three albums, just seeing the band progress and everything that it's accomplished, it's just so great to see where you guys are at now in 2023.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I know you go way back with this thing, so it's like it's been quite a journey, and as you know, it's been more of a journey or a longer journey than I think a lot of people realize. Going way back, I guess almost 6 years at this point, or over 6 years. So yeah, it's amazing how this thing has grown and how many people have been along for the ride as well, especially people who like, I guess, piano pop or whatever electronic music wouldn't necessarily be their bag in a normal time, but they're willing to stretch themselves out and give a chance to, what we have to offer, which is, very meaningful.
Oh, very much so. I mean, everything that you've been able to accomplish just with Silent Skies. And then you also look at something like Redemption, where you get to show a different side of your personalities together working in that form. It's so cool to see both of those happening here in 2023. But of course, next Friday, we're talking here about the third album from Silent Skies, Dormant, which I've gotten the chance to be able to check out for quite a bit of time now. And I'm so fortunate to have been able to spend all this time with it because I really feel like it is the best Silent Skies album to date so far. I love the diversity. I love the different sounds that are going along with it. The bonus tracks that you picked on here with the covers, which I found to be very meaningful, and being able to take songs and just give them that proper Silent Skies edge to them. Everything about this from start to finish, I just love.
Thank you, man. And honestly, we feel the same way. Like we really feel like this is a leveling up in every way. Not just the quality, but also, the different, the breadth of expansion of, the different sound characters and everything that's going on, new textures, new vibes, new ways of achieving our, I suppose, signature melancholy, which is never, that quality is never really going to leave what we do, but we express it in, a whole new universe of ways now. So, it's very gratifying that you recognize that, and also great that you've had the time to be able to dissect it, because I think this album, more than any of our past albums, really rewards time spent to really hear all of the fine details and the little elements that, make up the whole.
Oh, absolutely. And I was about to say that too. Like the diversity on this album, but the layers is something that I truly appreciate. I mean, on the first listen, I can understand how some people find it very simple, but the more that you listen to it and you really start to appreciate the vocal melodies that are going on, the instrumentation that's going on, an instrument that you may not have picked up on the first time that just has like those meaningful notes behind it, all of those have so many great qualities to them, and all the patches that you have for the synths and the keys and the real piano that's going on there, everything just sounds so perfect with it, and you start to appreciate that more every time that you fully listen to the album.
Thank you. I mean, we're talking about an album that took nearly a year to make, and in contrast, Nectar took about 4 months from very start to finishing of mastering. So the extra amount of time spent is a reflection of the fact that Tom and I were, I would say obsessive about every single element that you hear. Vocal melodies, every word of the lyrics, we would sit down together and chisel out these, the perfect phrasings and the perfect melodies for the lyrics, but also little things such as maybe the shakuhachi plays four notes and picking the exact four notes, and where are those four notes on the stereo spectrum, and how does the volume change, and all these very, very tiny production details. The production process, and by extension, the mixing process, was very, I'll say arduous, but arduous has a negative connotation that I don't exactly mean. It just, there was a lot of work, but it was kind of like a labor of love to make every little detail pop. And me mixing the album was another element of that, that I wanted to be able to get down to the absolute fine tip at the end of what was going on here and just control every little detail. You know, I guess a healthy amount of being a control freak, because obviously, you don't want to be a control freak too much in any aspect of your life. But I indulged the control freak a little bit here with the process of making this album, and I think it paid off because, like you point out, there are so many of these little details that either are, there are more such details than on the past two albums, but they also come to fruition better because we've been so much more intelligent about how we select these details and how we present them, so that really nothing gets lost. And if you listen with the headphones at a decent volume, you can hear everything. And these are songs that have, 100 plus tracks in the session, despite the fact that they may sound, simple. But I mean, a song like The Real Me has like 150 channels in Logic. So it's like, these aren't simple songs. They just have the outward appearance of being simple, which we also want. We don't want things to sound cluttered or manic or schizophrenic. Like, we want you to be able to sit down and just let it happen and relax and enjoy it. But we also wanted to reward the detailed listening if, you're the kind of listener who enjoys doing that, which I think is the kind of listener we're, most tailor made to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So thinking about that, especially when it comes to the production, the mixing and the mastering, like when you're doing that yourself, like how hard is it to be able to decide especially when it comes to the mixing, like how hard is it to decide how you're going to layer everything and what's going to be more prominent, what's going to be more in the background?
It's hard and easy. It's hard because you form an attachment to everything, and you form an attachment to every little bleep loop that you laid down as a total whim. And then you want to hear all these things, cranked to the fore. But it's easy insofar as you're able to establish foreground and background yourself with your own subjectivity. And we've worked with great mixers in the past. We had Christer Andre Soderberg do the first album. He's best known for Weather Systems and Distant Satellites from Anathema. And we had Jacob Hansen mix the second album, and his credits need no introduction. But on this album, I really enjoyed the fact that I was able to, with my own subjectivity, kind of dictate the balance of foreground and background. And if the balance wasn't cutting perfectly to my ears, I knew exactly what to do to fix it. There's a little bit of a information lag when you work with an external mixer, in which case where they may not exactly hear the music the same way, and they may not push the elements in the same way, and they may not know exactly what to chisel out or exactly what to boost to achieve what I'm hearing in my subjective head. And honestly, for most types of music, I think that's a benefit. I think that outside perspective really helps the music shine. But this level is so this music is so intimate yet expansive that it's like there are so many little details, and they can all be quite naked because they're not covered under a giant wall of distorted guitars and drums and stuff. But at the same time, that's a double-edged sword because it also can get cluttered very quickly. Whereas I feel like in a metal mix, if I'm mixing a metal band, if they have 60 tracks of keyboards in post-production, I can make that fit relatively easily. Sometimes just by dropping the volume, but you can't really achieve that on a mix like this. You have to delicately balance every element, and it kind of becomes like walking a tightrope. And you stray ever so slightly in the wrong direction, the mix loses its balance. So it's very challenging, but also we got to a better result quicker, I think, than if we had someone else working on it.
Oh, definitely. So thinking about that as well too, like, does Tom put in his inputs on like what sounds he wants to come to the forefront when it comes into the mixing, or does he leave that to you?
Generally speaking, he has an opinion on everything. Um, and I mean that in a great way. He has one of the most discerning pairs of ears that I've ever encountered. And to be honest, he hears many things that I don't hear. Or if I hear them, they don't seem important to me, but they're important to him. And then I realize, in hindsight, that they actually were quite important, and he was right to fixate on these things. But he's not just concerned with the vocal level and the vocal sound, but he's thinking about all these little details and also the presentation and the effects and everything. So, the right balance of wet versus dry, of, reverby and ethereal versus upfront and intimate. Achieving that balance is very important to him and also very important to me because we do try to have a foot in both worlds. We like to be expansive and ethereal, but also very direct and dry and in your face and personal. And if you go too far in one direction, you threaten to compromise the other. So that's a very delicate balance. And he's very good at, judging if I've stepped too far in one direction versus the other. In particular, of course, with vocals, but also in terms of the piano sounds, he had me reevaluate my approach to like the reverbs on the pianos and on the cellos as well. And my first mix was very, very ethereal, and I guess in retrospect was probably almost like an Enya mix. And then he had me scale it back so that it was more kind of like upfront and focused. The songs come across more focused if you give them that presentation. But he's very valuable in that process. If I was doing it myself, with no input from him, I don't think it would have come out as strong or as us in a way, if that makes sense.
And that's why I love the two of you working together, because whether it's Redemption, whether it's Silent Skies, it always feels like you two gel together so very well. And it's good to see that it's not just in the recording studio, it's not just playing live. It just feels like it's overall that you two just understand each other and you're able to work together so well.
We've developed a very close relationship, and it's actually kind of funny. I was reflecting on this the other day that I think a lot of projects, especially projects that I guess you could call side projects, which we hate that term. It's not a side project to us, but I guess to some people this is a side project. And a lot of these things come together by friends who come together and say, maybe we should try writing some music. And then I realized that Silent Skies was completely backwards from that. He came to me completely a stranger, personally speaking, saying we should make an album together. And then the friendship kind of followed and developed afterwards, and it very conceivably could have not formed. It was kind of a leap of faith, but we both had some element of faith that this thing was going to work out. And he ended up becoming, I would say, one of my closest friends. And I talked to him so much. He joked to me one day, I think I talked to you more than my wife. Which may be true, but we spend so much time closely working together, and the things you mention are really scratching the surface because we have a production company as well, Silent Skies Productions, where we do a lot of work for video games and expanding out into other forms of media as well. But right now, we're deep in the video game world, and we're actually working on a score right now that's due in like a month and change. So we're constantly working together in so many different arenas, cinematic, Silent Skies music, metal, and we're in each other's worlds in so many different ways. And like we never get sick of each other because we have so much respect for what the other has to say and what we're giving creatively. And it's the kind of creative partnership that I've never had before, and I'm not sure I will ever have again. It's a very, very special kind of kindred spirit thing. And it comes from not just mutual respect, but a shared artistic and aesthetic vision. And we like many of the same things. And we're striving towards the same goal, even though we have extremely different backgrounds. And I come from a very, well-educated music conservatory background, and he comes from an Evergrey background, but we meet in the middle because of our shared interests and our shared goals.
Oh, for sure. So going into that a little bit deeper, I mean, you did touch on it that you're entering the gaming world and you're able to be doing scores like this. What is that like for you? Like, do you get to have like full creative freedom when you're working on a score? Does the production companies have an idea of what they want you to accomplish? How does that work?
Well, the idea of working with media is not new to me. I actually got my degree in scoring for film, so I understand the process of working with visual media. But games has a very different, particular workflow. I think anyone who's scored movies and TV and then moved into games immediately understands the difference in workflow and why it can be very challenging because you you think of music in different blocks, and if you think about the fact that a game is infinitely repeatable with different outcomes depending on what the player does, the music needs to be flexible and adaptive, and the music has to be able to move with the player, which is a thing that you don't need to do in cinema. The action happens linearly and you follow what's on the screen, and essentially that's that. Working with games is very complicated, but as you allude to, studios and production companies also have very strict visions of what they want to accomplish. We've had the fortune of working with big franchises. You know, we worked on the Evil Dead game in 2021. We worked on the World War C Aftermath DLC, Dakar Desert Rally, and right now we're finishing up a score in the Warhammer franchise for Space Marine 2. And these things are established franchises and they have established sounds. And to a certain degree, you have to work within those parameters because that's what it is. When people buy a Warhammer game, it has to sound a certain way. We can't start throwing in like a mandolin and fiddle and you know that's not Warhammer. But it's actually cool because it's nice to work within someone else's creative parameters rather than your own. That can be very, very liberating. You don't have to think about it that way. And also, we have in Silent Skies a mentality that I like to call radical honesty, where we don't put up any walls when we're writing. And if we want to do something creatively, we do it. And it's a very, very free and liberating process to creativity, but it also presents challenges. And working in games removes that challenge because you really don't have that liberating quality. It's mission oriented, no pun intended, mission oriented composing, and that's a very nice thing to do when you spend so much of your creative life just throwing stuff in every which direction and seeing what sticks, and following the insanity of a creative ADHD muse in every direction. It's nice to have something that's more targeted and focused. And I'm not sure I would love working for games so much if they said just do whatever. That's honestly a somewhat terrifying thought, especially when you're talking about a billion, multi-million dollar franchise. So, just a completely different skill set and different mindset, but it's a lot of fun. It really is.
Oh, definitely. And it's great to see that you're able to show so many different sides of your musical and production palettes when you're able to work with other developers and production companies like that, when you're able to work with different musicians, whether you're in a band with them or you're doing a mix or production, whatever the case is. And again, like just going back to what I was saying in the beginning, it's just so incredible to see everything that you've been able to accomplish since our last real interview that we got to do, because it's just like there's so many things that I could count off of things that I've loved, whether you're doing guest appearances with orchestration, whether you're playing with one of my all-time favorite bands, Pain of Salvation, whether you're continuing to work with Redemption and Silent Skies, and of course Silent Skies Productions now. Everything that's going along with that. I mean, just that resume just keeps building and building, and I can't think of someone who deserves it more than you do.
That's very kind of you, man. Thank you. And it's a product of musical ADHD, and also the fact that, like, ever since the very beginning of my musicality, before I had a career when I was in school, I could never do one thing. Sometimes I think to the frustration of my piano teacher, who was a very, very great but strict piano instructor at the Cleveland Institute of Music. Fantastic. I wouldn't approach the instrument the way I do without him. But I think at first it was odd to him that I was so into this world, and then I had to be in so many other worlds as well. I had to play jazz. I had to play rock. I had to do all these things. I had to compose classical music. I had to compose rock. I had to compose jazz. I had to do electronic music. I couldn't just do one thing. And a lot of classical musicians, at least at the onset, they start being very specialized. And I never wanted to be that way. I always found that restrictive and honestly a little bit boring. And I also felt that they could influence each other in ways. When I was playing the music of Bartok with my piano teacher, I started to recognize rhythms that were familiar to me from playing Dream Theater. For a lot of classical musicians, when they're growing up and they first get into music like Bartok or Stravinsky with very complicated mixed meters and changing time signatures, it's very difficult for them to understand that. But I had been listening to, scenes from my memory so much that it's like, all right, I can play Dance of Eternity. I can probably play Bartok, you know? So being interested in different things will always make you a better and more well-rounded musician. And at this stage, if I start a work week, I could be doing 4 or 5 or 6 different genres by the end of that work week and working in different capacities with people. And I think that's really important. I also think it's necessary as a modern musician. It's so damn hard to make a living in this industry. And if you don't diversify your skills and your business and the ways that income is flowing in, it's going to be so challenging to make it happen. It's like you can't just pump out a few albums and expect to have it made. I mean, if you do, that's absolutely fantastic. But the reality is you'll probably have to diversify. And I'm just fortunate that being a diverse musician has kind of been built into my DNA from the beginning. But, I guess that was just luck of the draw there that my natural creative ADHD has helped my business in a way.
Definitely. So, going a little bit more into that diversity, with this brand new album, Dormant, again coming out next Friday, there's a few bonus tracks which I alluded to in the beginning, which is seeing a very different side of both you and Tom that I'm familiar with from knowing you guys. Seeing you guys cover Bruce Springsteen, Iron Maiden, and Linkin Park in the same album with this really dark, ethereal, but yet poppy and well modernized album. I mean, what was it like to start incorporating covers in the Silent Skies?
It's always been to some degree natural. I mean, Tom has covered music with Evergrey going like way back to I'm Sorry and stuff, on Recreation Day. And we covered Here Comes the Rain Again, here the mix on the first album. And I guess before I was ever making original music for, the metal crowd, I was doing piano covers on YouTube. So we've always, both of us independently and together, enjoyed applying our own creativity to an existing piece of music and not just regurgitating what's there, but reshaping it and recontextualizing it into our universe. It's a very comfortable idea for us. But the particular fun and challenge of those 3 covers that are the bonus tracks here is that we really wanted to pick songs that people wouldn't expect us to do, first of all, to do songs that have a very different aesthetic feel than what we do, but have this underlying core emotionality, like, at the center of it all, that is very important to us. And basically strip back all the layers and then rebuild it, in our image and be informed by what they do, but also be informed by who we are and what we like to do as musicians and our natural tendencies, and let our natural tendencies color this music with the hopeful outcome that it brings out a level of emotionality that is present in the original songs, but maybe not apparent to the average fan who hears the Trooper on rock radio and is essentially just hearing fast riffs and powerful vocals, but to hear what's actually going on beneath the surface there, narratively, lyrically, emotionally, even musically. One exception being Dancing in the Dark, where the lyrics are so beautiful and sad and he just sounds so listless and like he just he's so lacking a purpose in the lyrics of that song. It's a very relatable sentiment actually. Of like you don't know where you're going, you don't know where you've been, you don't know who you are. Very relatable, but it's dressed in a classic like synth pop thing. Where I think a lot of people who know the song "Dancing in the Dark" just think it's one of those cliche '80s pop jams. But there's so much going on there, and I actually rearranged all the chords in that song. So I rewrote the chords from scratch to be in a minor key to fit how I felt the lyrical narrative was going. So I just took the vocal melody and isolated it and played different chords that fit it. And that's just a radical example of our own creativity being put upon these existing songs. But it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's not as much of a challenge as it seems. It's actually quite effortless to do that. And I would say it's not that we didn't work hard on those covers. Everything we do is subject to agonizing scrutiny. But the original creative process is very, very free flowing and effortless and fun. And like I said, covering music has been a part of my DNA since the beginning. So it's natural.
Oh yeah, and just thinking about all the covers that you guys have done in the past in various forms, it was so cool to see that. And of course, like you mentioned on the first Silent Skies album, what a beautiful cover that was. But specifically with these three, like you mentioned, the fact that you were able to take the chords and rewrite them and just being able to really make the songs your own, whether it be the vocal melodies, whether it be the chords, making it in minor scale. There's so much that you're able to do with it where you can hear the original, but you really do make it your own.
There are so many different parameters in music that you can play with. And, chords are one very valuable part of them. And then one thing that has become a defining character of Silent Skies is texture and timbre and sound quality is something that we've really been expanding with. And it's one way that we can keep the harmonic language of what we do relatively consistent, but expand the palette quite radically. Dancing in the Dark, I actually often forget this, but I actually played a lot of recorder on that song. I have a four-piece set of recorders from elementary school, and I just played them into a microphone and I ran it through the modular synth rig and did all kinds of weird, bizarre permutations to them and playing them backwards and all these weird things. But starting from a sound source that I would have never dreamt of using before. I don't think I ever thought I would touch those recorders again. So you just think about all these different ways to make music interesting, and it's always worth being a little bit restless as a creative. And even if you want to stay true to who you are, and if you have a core essence, in terms of lyrics and chords and melodies, there are always ways you can make things interesting.
Oh, for sure. So, thinking about everything again, I mean, you mentioned stuff that you're currently working on right now, of course, with Silent Skies Productions, but musically, what is going on after the release of this album?
Well, we dived straight into Silent Skies 4. We've actually already started it. Um, we have music that I'd say we were writing alongside Dormant that didn't fit the universe of Dormant, but has a home. And we're such inspired, restless creatives that there's always creative juices flowing. And honestly, I never have a shortage of ideas. I have shortages of other things, mainly time and also sometimes energy and mental health is a bitch. But aside from all that, as far as just creativity is concerned, there really is no shortage. I'm quite fortunate in that regard. When it comes to writing a Silent Skies album, I usually go up to my parents' place in Cleveland, and I have the felted piano there, which is where I recorded the last two albums. But it's also the piano I grew up on, what I learned to play on. If I sit down at that piano for 5 hours with my voice recorder on my phone, I can write a whole album. And I think for Dormant, I wrote 6 songs in one morning on that piano, just writing out the chords and getting the vibes. So there's always stuff happening in our world, and I think that just as Silent Skies 3 came relatively soon after 2, I'm optimistic that 4 will come relatively soon after 3, and I think it's going to push in more new directions, and I think some of them people may not expect. But if I guess if there's one universal constant to who we are in our progression, it's that you shouldn't get too comfortable and you shouldn't think you can expect exactly what's coming because there will be a twist that you don't foresee. So yeah, hopefully, maybe in the next year or so, we're, like I said, we've already got a few songs in the bag for that. So fingers crossed.
Oh, fantastic. And that's already got me excited. And Dormant's not even out yet. And I'm already excited for number 4. That's just got me so excited. And again, I love you and Tom working together, no matter the capacity. You two just work together so very well. And, from my perspective, I just love everything that's been done so far. And I'm very excited to see what's going to be happening in the future with that. And of course, to everyone else with Dormant coming out next Friday, I'm very excited to see what people are going to be thinking about this album because it really does feel like a natural progression for what you two do. And just seeing the sounds get expanded, seeing the music get deeper, seeing the lyrics, of course, always staying so somber but uplifting at the same time, just that great feel behind it. Everything about Silence Guys I love, and it's just so great to see this is continuing on.
Thank you, man. That's very kind. And I too am very curious to see what people think. It's always interesting when the album goes out into the world and it's no longer, just your own. And then you see how people interpret it and see how it's different from your own. I've already seen some very interesting takes on the album. And some takes that I'm not sure I agree with, but at the same time, it's like that's subjectivity. And one of the most beautiful things in music is that everyone has their own set of ears. And it's one of the ways that we are the most individual as people, the way we process art and the lens through which we understand it is such a powerful reflection of who we are and our identities and our individuality. So even if someone hears something in my music that I don't hear or I don't intend, that's a beautiful thing. So I always welcome people to listen with the most open and receptive ears that they can.
Oh, what a great way to be. Well, again, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to be able to talk to me about everything that's going on in the world of Silent Skies, be it the band, be it the production work, be it everything else that you do outside of all of that when you're working with other musicians. All of that is so great. But before we go, I just wanted to ask you because it's something that's very near and dear to me, and I know it's something that's very near and dear to you. How are you doing mentally?
I'm holding up. I'm holding up. I mean, it's a loaded question. You ask anyone with our struggles that question, it's bound to be a loaded question. But it. I hate to say it, but I'm so busy that I can't afford to get bogged down. It's like it's almost you have to be a little bit bullheaded with yourself, and the ghosts start to whisper, but it's like fuck off, I got shit to do. That's basically how I've had to be. I have had no choice because especially when you deal with things like the game scoring and stuff, it's like it's got to get done. We're talking about huge ass companies who need this to get done yesterday, you know? So it's like you can't afford to, it's somewhat unfortunate. I wish I'd been able to take more time off. I really am feeling like I could use some time off, to be honest. But it's like, there's just the windows are few and far between to catch a breath, which is not something I encourage to anyone listening. Please take a breath. Please don't be like me. Don't. I'm not saying the bullheaded thing is good. Don't do that. I do have limited choice at this time, but it's like you take it one day at a time. It's really important to find the peace and the motivation where you can. For me, right now, a big obsession has become like physical fitness and training and stuff like that. So for at least an hour a day, that's like my safe space to not think about bullshit and just, work on bettering myself. There's so many ways we can better ourselves. And there's such a diversity of ways to better yourself that I think there is a way for all of us. But it's sometimes very hard to find. And then once you find it, it's very hard to cling to it because, the brain's a bitch. and the brain will tell you don't do it, and the brain will tell you it's not worth doing it. Whatever. The brain can conjure a litany of excuses for whatever we got to do, and you know, it's just we just got to put one foot in front of the other. I mean, it's hard, but hopefully, one thing that I've been thinking about with this album is that I've been thinking about how helpful emotional honesty is for society. And I've been thinking about our music as a reflection of how I think we should all be as people. I think that we should all be very open and upfront and honest about our mental health issues and our issues in general, because if you close yourself off and you pretend that everything is fine, then the other people in the world who are looking at you will think that you're fine. And then if they have their own problems, they may feel inherently deficient as a result. Like if you imagine a whole society of people doing this and you feel broken inside and you look out and you think, wow, I'm deficient. I'm a freak, I'm the rest of the world is so well put together and I'm not. And I think that if we're all honest about our problems, then instead people can look out at society and say, hey, I'm not alone. Look at all the people who deal with very similar things to what I deal with. There's, a human community here of all of us having our shit, but all of us working through it the best we can together, helping each other, loving each other, inspiring each other. I view our music in a very similar way. We're honest about our emotions. Our lyrics are sometimes uncomfortably honest with, the level of, emotional trauma that we may be dealing with. But the idea is that our listeners can hear that and see themselves in our lyrics and understand that there's some element of healing community here, and that whatever you're feeling, we're feeling, or we have felt. And this is how we experienced it. And these are some of the thoughts we had. And here are some of the ways that we moved past it and the ways that we found peace. If we're all open about these things, we're able to help each other. And why the hell would you not want to help each other? I mean, come on. Like, what is our responsibility? Like we got to help each other. We get one planet, we get one life. We should do our best to make the world and other people in it, happier and doing better. So I feel like honesty is the best way to achieve that, to put forth your honest, true selves and, find community and individuality that way. So that was a bit of a tangent, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying, that, this is a thing that's very important to the way that I make music, because I'm not speaking for Tom here. I'm speaking for myself, because I don't know if he sees it this way. But for me personally, I want to help people. I've always wanted to help people. I want to make the world a better place. I want to inspire and uplift and energize and reach out to people. And I would do it in any way that I could, but I feel like music is, the tool that I've been given to achieve that. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not a whatever influencer. I don't write books. I don't make paintings. I don't do film. I make music. That's how I connect with people. And I feel that I have this tool and I can use this tool however I want. And I choose to use this tool to inspire people and to reach people and help even a small amount of people deal with the shit show that is life. And, I feel like for me personally, making music for a strictly insular purpose and only caring about my own self-satisfaction doesn't interest me that much. I know many artists work that way, but it doesn't really interest me that much to be so egocentric in the way that I make music. You have to be egocentric to a certain extent and follow your own muse, but I really think that ultimately for me, reaching other people is the most important thing. And I see that we're almost out of time, so I'm gonna wrap that tangent up.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately, Zoom is about to cut me off, but thank you for leading off on that. I really wanted to end in with that mental health talk, because, that's something that's both near and dear to both of us. And you said some very inspiring words that helped me all the way back then when we first talked about it together. Right now, it's helping me. The music that you make also does that for me as well. And I just want to thank you for being such a great person, being able to care about people, caring about the music that you make, wanting it to mean something, and being so open about mental health. Thank you for everything that you do.